Most people think that starting from scratch and achieving financial independence is a modern idea. The whole FIRE movement, early retirement, passive income, that's all 21st century, right? Well, not quite, because back in 1748, at 42 years old, Benjamin Franklin stepped away from his business to retire early. And in this episode, I want to tell you how he did it, explain what he did with his free time after he retired early, and then give you a few takeaways that I found that we can use almost 300 years later. I've been thinking a lot about Benjamin Franklin. I read a biography by him last year by Walter Isaacson, one of my favorite biographies I've ever read. And what was really fascinating to me, in addition to all the other stories you might have heard with Benjamin Franklin, was about his early retirement story. How he started from scratch. He had a big family. He was one of 10 kids, and all of them were kind of in trades and apprenticeships in colonial America. And he actually got into the printing business and started from scratch at first with his brother. Then he moved to Philadelphia and just had a roundabout way of just learning and getting into the business. But by the time he was 42 years old, had enough wealth to retire early. And I want to talk about what kind of wealth he had. So he had several different sources of wealth that he built up over the years. Number one, and the most important one for him, he was an entrepreneur. He started a business in the printing business. And so those of us who now watch social media and we understand influencers in the 21st century, he was the original American influencer. He got into the printing business where back then you printed newspapers, pamphlets, books, and he also wrote a lot of his articles for his printing business. But he's very entrepreneurial, worked really hard, and ended up owning his own business. And by the time he was 42, he actually did something really interesting. He had his foreman or his operator, the person who kind of ran his printing business, and he sold the business to that person. And he essentially owner financed it. So the payments on the price of the business that he sold to his foreman supported him cash flow wise for many, many years to come. So number one, build a business, be an entrepreneur, really interesting way to create cash flow and wealth. But number two, and interesting for a lot of us who are into real estate, he owned real estate. So he was one of the original house hackers. So he had a house on Market Street in Philadelphia, and he also built little rental properties around his home on Market Street. He was often traveling anyway, so he would rent out rooms and rent out the property around him. So he used rental income. He was a small and mighty real estate investor that he used to support himself, to grow his wealth. He also bought land. So I think he had land in various parts of the colonies, in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, where he lived, also in Nova Scotia, which is now in Canada. So he was a landowner and bought that over the years. And he used his real estate investments both to grow in value, but also to produce income. He was big on the cash flow side of things. And because of his printing business, he actually had franchises for his printing businesses in other parts of the colonies. So he got to know people all over. He was also the postmaster general eventually, which in those days is essentially like the network of information. So if you're delivering mail, it's like the internet today. You have a lot of control over what's going on. Newspapers that are delivered, information that's flowing. So those are a couple things he got into. He also, interestingly, for those of you in the real estate business, he also did private lending. He talks about loaning money to other merchants and just basically making interest. So as he saved money and built wealth, he would loan that out. So business income, real estate income, private lending income. Then, of course, he was also, as you've probably heard of him, as a diplomat, as a ambassador, also as the postmaster that I was talking about before. He did make some money with his government pay, but his primary sources of wealth and income that allowed him to retire early came from these other sources. But what's really interesting to me to talk about is you've heard about early retirement, and most people, the response I give, and also a lot of people give, is like, at 42 years old, are you really going to retire? Was Benjamin Franklin sipping a pina colada, sitting on the beach in his sandals? Well, no, not at all, because nobody I know who retires early does it to sit on the beach sipping a pina colada, although that's nothing wrong with that either. The point for him, and for me, and maybe for you too, is to buy back your time. So once you have flexibility and options, it's like you're a little kid again. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so Benjamin Franklin, to me, is a professional role model. He had some other things that I was not so keen on reading the biography, which is always the case when you read a biography. But he was professionally very diverse in the things he was interested in. He was into science. He did some of the original experiments on discovering electricity. And the famous kite experiment, you see the picture here, where he flew a kite, had a key on there, and was discovered that the electricity came from lightning and came from and kind of showed the principles of what electricity was. Really, really cool. He also invented things, the bifocals, so some of the original glasses that people used to read. He invented stoves. He invented lightning rods that people put on their houses, so a lot of practical inventions. He traveled all over the place, traveled around the world, visiting different places. He was always a writer with his printing background. He had civic projects, really interesting. He and a group of other merchants in his town started basically insurance, fire insurance, because at that point you couldn't buy it from a third party. So they collectively put their money together and said, hey, if one of our properties burned down, we'll help each other out. And so it was a public civic project. He also did other things related to the fire department, related to hospitals. So very, very involved in his local community, which I admire as well. He got into politics. And so these days, politics might not be as sexy or as interesting. I've gotten a lot involved in my local politics as an activist trying to get local trails and biking, and it's actually really interesting, especially on the local level. Well, he was involved in this Philadelphia politics, Pennsylvania politics, and as we know, also in helping to write the Declaration of Independence, helping being one of the founding fathers, voting on the Constitution, and then very importantly, you can see here helping write the Declaration of Independence with Thomas Jefferson. I got a picture if you're watching on YouTube, but he was also probably critically in the birth of the United States, was an ambassador to France and was a negotiated alliance with between France and the United States. Without that alliance, pretty clear the United States, what is now the United States, wouldn't have won the Revolutionary War. So you could almost say without Benjamin Franklin being financially independent, being able to go do those things, the United States wouldn't be what it is today. Really, really interesting. And then finally, he had philanthropy. He gave money. He had one thing he gave money to that gave grants to small business owners for hundreds of years. And it was in trust by, I believe, the city of Philadelphia or some local organization that gave money away using some of the money he had in his estate. So lots and lots of details. Read his biography, other details about him. Very interesting person. But the thing to me about this, kind of the takeaway about early retirement, was he used his time. He bought his time back for discovery. So just what was he's curious about? What did he want to learn about? And then impact, giving back to the community, contributing, which is actually one of the coolest ways to use your time. So my takeaways here, Benjamin Franklin, I recommend you read more about him. But the big one for those of us who are interested here in 2025 and beyond in financial freedom is, how did he get there? He was a big proponent. He wrote the Poor Charlie's Almanac back in the days, and he talked about frugality and industriousness, which just means hard work. So he focused on earning money, in his case as a merchant, but whatever business you're in, building some skills, like work on what you're good at so you can earn more money. But then you got to save money. You actually have to set aside the money that you earn. If you spend all of it, you'll never be able to invest in things and assets that are going to make you money. And then he did invest in that. And we talked about what they invested in, his business first and foremost. I love entrepreneurship. So if you have a side hustle or if you have a full-time business, it could be the best way you have to have financial freedom. And then he partnered with somebody else who could help him have time freedom at that point. But then also real estate and diversify into land and real estate investments and loaning money, which is also something I've done, owning notes. So he got good at investing his money. And as simple as that sounds, that's really the formula for financial freedom. Take some time, take some ups and downs and some luck, of course, but earning, saving, investing, still the formula for achieving financial freedom. I also love that he did it small and mighty style. And there's an important part of this story here. When he was 42 years old, he decided to walk away from his business. He said, I have enough. Actually, there's a quote that I read preparing for this. He said, I've done enough for profit at 42 years old. So essentially saying, I have other contributions I want to make that don't necessarily make money. He wanted to study. He invented a bunch of things and he basically put them in the public domain. He had patents on them, I believe, in some cases, but he didn't make money off of those. It's like my scientific experiments, I'm doing it for the public, for humanity. Really cool. But he was able to do that because he had made profit before and because he's willing to walk away and say, I'm willing to do other things with my life that matter to me. And I find that fork in the road where you can say, I have enough is really difficult, still difficult for me to this day. But when I've been able to do that and take a path where I'm spending more time with my kids, I'm traveling, I'm living abroad, not because I want to make more money, but because that's what matters to me at that stage of my life, Really, really cool. And that's a core component of the small and mighty style of investing. And then the big one, probably the big takeaway that I'll leave with you too, is thinking about like what matters to you. Like if you had all the time in the world, if you had financial independence, if you could do what you wanted to and follow your curiosity, what would you learn about? What would you do just because you're interested in it? And what kind of impact would you make? What kind of people, what kind of problems do you want to help solve? What's bugging you that nobody's working on that you could be working on if you had the time to do it, if you maybe had the money and resources to help contribute to that? That's the kind of driver for me. That's what motivates me to earn and save and invest. And I think it's one of the coolest things we can do as a community of people who are trying to achieve financial freedom is to kind of go full circle, to give back, to make an impact, to use our money and our time to make a difference in our communities or whatever larger impacts you want to make. That is part of the legacy I've seen from Benjamin Franklin that's really inspiring. And if you find it inspiring, might be worth studying a little bit as well. So if you're inspired by this idea of buying back your time, of achieving financial freedom, just like Benjamin Franklin did, I want to tell you about a passion project of mine, something I spent a lot of time on called Rental Property Mastery. This is a private community of small and mighty investors. It's a place where I teach and coach and help support you to achieve financial freedom using rental properties. And we focus a lot on kind of the fundamentals of real estate investing, on how do you buy properties better, how do you finance them, including using alternative sources of financing like private money, but also traditional, conventional financing as well. And then once you own properties, how do you manage them and build systems and deliver better quality to your tenants, and also build systems so you're not spending 100% of your time on your rental properties. So if that's something you're interested in and you're an intermediate to advanced investor, you can go to coachcarson.com/RPM. And when you go to that page, if you are interested, we do have an application process because we have a cap of 300 members. We're actually approaching that cap. We're over 250 members now, just to find out a little bit more about you, to see if you're a good fit. And if you're already own a couple properties, you'll probably be a good fit. And we would love to hear from you. So again, it's coachcarson.com/RPM. Thank you so much for watching this episode or listening to this episode. I hope you found it enjoyable, and I'll see you next time.